Hello everybody. We finally reached the climax of our series on Dunedin's great exhibitions, just in time to celebrate the centenary of the biggest of them all, the New Zealand and South Seas International Exhibition of 1925-26. It promised to be the greatest spectacle of its kind ever held in the Dominion, and it certainly was. The exhibition ran from the 17th of November 1925 until the 1st of May 1926, and it was visited 3,200,498 times in those 24 weeks, at a time when the entire population of New Zealand was less than half that number. The exhibition was designed by architect Edmund Anscombe and covered 6.5 hectares of reclaimed land at what would become known as Logan Park. Core capital cost of constructing the exhibition complex was £254,000, which is the equivalent of about $31.5 million in today's money. The exhibition comprised 7 pavilions, grouped on either side of a grand court. At the head of the grand court was the festival hall, with a stage, dance floor, seating for an audience of up to 2,500 people, and topped off with its distinctive grand dome. The festival hall was pictured in much of the publicity material for the exhibition, in numerous photographs and postcards, and on souvenir memorabilia of all kinds, from printed ephemera to trinkets such as wall hangings, wooden postcards, tape measures and paperweights, to textiles such as this handkerchief, this supper cloth, and this tablecloth, and to a variety of ceramics. As well as the 7 pavilions, other buildings at the back of the site included a fernery, a Māori house, an aquarium, a cabaret, refreshment rooms, and an art gallery. There was a sports ground where large gatherings took place, and of course an amusement park that was home to a variety of rides and sideshows, including the Scenic Railway, which was the largest attraction of its type erected in New Zealand to that date. With over 500,000 tickets for the 3-minute ride sold during the exhibition, the Scenic Railway was the amusement park's most popular attraction. Another distinctive attraction was the Fun Factory, where the fun was provided by moving stairways and floors and long slides. However, it wasn't a fun experience for all of its 394,789 customers, as several of them sustained serious injuries in this somewhat dangerous attraction. And here's another feature of the amusement park, the Three Castles cigarette stall, which was next to the whip ride, at the entrance to the amusement area. You may remember in an earlier episode in this series, we talked about David de Morse being the official photographer for the 1889-90 exhibition. In 1925, that role belonged to opticians and photographic equipment suppliers Hugh and G.K. Neal. After training in Britain, Outram-born optician Hugh Neal went into business in Dunedin in 1905. He was joined in the business by younger brother Gordon in 1921, and a couple of years later the brothers became photographic equipment suppliers as well as opticians, despite suffering a slight setback when their premises caught fire during the fit-out of their new photography department in 1924. Photography outside in the exhibition grounds by members of the public was allowed if you purchased a permit, which cost 6pence and was only valid for the day of your visit. But indoor photography by members of the public was prohibited, leaving Hugh and G.K. Neal to capture images like these. Many would be published, such as these ones which appear in the special pictorial history that was issued in the wake of the exhibition. The special pictorial history was printed by Couls Somerville Wilkie of Dunedin and Wellington, who had this display at the exhibition. Thomas Somerville of Coles Somerville Wilkie was also a member of the board of directors for the exhibition. Here we see another example of Coles Somerville Wilkie taking a photograph by Hugh and G.K. Neal, in this case a view of the Grand Court at night, and adapting it into print, and thereby capturing the reflections of the coloured lights in the lagoon in front of the festival hall in a way that black and white photography couldn't. In similar fashion to the oil painting by Abraham Peterson, which we saw back at the start of the episode. Coles Somerville Wilkie also had the job of producing these award diplomas, which were illustrated by the company's designer Will C. Burrell. Between 600 and 700 diplomas were awarded in the competitive sections, and over 300 of these Green General Excellence Awards in the non-competitive sections. A competition had been held early in 1925 to design the cover of the exhibition catalogue. Herbert Prowse was the winner. Prowse was a designer who'd been born in Ballarat in 1892 and married in Dunedin in 1916, just a few days before heading into camp with the 16th Reinforcements. After suffering a disabling injury to his right hand, he had to switch to drawing with his left. His paintings and designs were highly commended at a disabled soldiers exhibition held in London in 1918. Herbert Prowse had studied art under Robert Hawkridge at the Dunedin School of Art, as well as in England and France, prior to setting up a studio in Dunedin not long before he won the competition to design the cover. He would also become an art teacher, including at King Edward Technical College. A few years later, he left Dunedin to join the staff of the Borstal School in Invercargill, and subsequently taught at a Borstal in the Waikato before becoming a Methodist minister. Second place in the competition to design the souvenir catalogue cover went to Marjorie Gatheridge, a commercial illustrator for Coles Somerville Wilkie, who'd previously had a studio in London. It's her work we saw earlier on the covers of Hugh and G.K. Neal's souvenir booklet. Marjorie Gatheridge also lent work for display in the women's section of the exhibition and gave demonstrations of book illustrating there. Marjorie and her piano salesman husband only spent a few years in Dunedin in the 1920s before moving to Wellington, and by the late 1930s they were back in England. By the 1960s they'd returned to Dunedin, where they saw out their final years. It's time to let the sun go down on this episode, so we'll pick up the story again next time. See you then, and thanks for watching.